Hello and welcome back to the Boro Breakdown Opposition Preview Show with Tom Green and our guest for the evening, back for his second appearance of the season to give us a Norwich perspective in a Teesside accent. It's Matty Soakell. Matty, thanks for joining me today.
Hello, mate. Thanks so much for having me back. I quite like that introduction. I'll take it. It could have been a lot worse. So, cheers for having me.
I had to mix it up a bit. I said Teesside's biggest Boro fan last time. So Matty, speaking of last time, it was towards the end of Dean Smith's reign at Norwich. You weren't really a fan at the time, and he's just fallen upwards into the Leicester job, really surprisingly. But yeah, like I say, it's fair to say you weren't his biggest fan at that point. He's been replaced since by David Wagner. So firstly, were you happy with that appointment at the time?
Yes and no, Tom, honestly. It felt like, and some of the fans felt it was a bit of a cheap appointment, a bit of a, obviously there's the previous connection of Stuart Webber and David Wagner at Huddersfield. So a lot of people were immediately cynical that he's, jobs for the boys, he's gone and got his old mate and that kind of thing, and trying to just reproduce or recreate that success that they had at Huddersfield. It wasn't my first choice by any stretch, but anything was an improvement on Dean Smith in terms of getting the fans on side and even just an identity and a style of football. And you've got to give managers time, haven't you? Dean Smith had plenty of time. He had an unsuccessful Premier League and an unsuccessful first half of the season in the Championship. Wagner's inherited a lot of poorly coached players, I think. We're very unfit. We were very unfit when he took over. So I wasn't buzzing with the appointment, but it was an improvement. It was a step up, and that's only a positive, I suppose. So, and I think it's probably still too soon to judge him just yet. I think next season is probably the one where we look and we think a bit more critically of how we've performed under him, because, like I say, he's inherited some bad characteristics and some poor traits. I think certain players had almost declined, if I can be so critical, under Dean Smith and Shakespeare. So he's still got a lot of work to do, but we are seeing a little bit of the promise and a little bit of the reason as to why he was brought in. So yeah, ask me that in 6 or 12 months' time, and hopefully it's a lot more positive answer. But everyone's behind him, everyone's on board, and hopefully we can end the season well under him and start next season in a similar sort of manner.
You mentioned there seeing a little bit of promise from Wagner so far. What has he changed in his time at Norwich? Because if I'm remembering right, I actually said on the podcast shortly after he was appointed that I was looking at Norwich as potentially a dark horse to be concerned about in the playoffs, because I think he came in and was it a 4-0 win away straight away, and Pookie got on the score sheet as well.
Yeah, it was a great game to be at that. That was his first league game. Sorry, his first actual game. He'd only been in charge a couple of days, and we got beat by Blackburn in the FA Cup. But his first league game was Preston away 4-0. And then the following weekend we beat Coventry 4-2. I think it was in the space of a couple of weeks anyway. And everyone thought, first couple of games, 8 goals scored, we're back, sort of thing. And then things have been a bit inconsistent since then. Not a bit inconsistent, a lot inconsistent. So it's been a strange time. We've shown real good promise, and then this weekend just gone is a perfect example. I was at Blackburn on Friday. They were in 6th place. We were in 7th. I didn't really expect anything. Go there, win 2-0, and you think, oh, the playoff carrot is dangled once more. Do you know what I mean? And then we don't manage to beat Rotherham at home on Easter Monday. So that's the biggest criticism, I suppose, of us under Wagner so far, is that we've been, as we have all season, poor at home. We've been better away, but it's that inconsistency that's probably going to cost us on a playoff place. But I think the original question was kind of the stuff that sort of improved under Wagner. One of the biggest things, I think, and this will, again, I think there'll be more fruit for this next season, is general fitness. So as soon as he came in, and this is one of the things that I remember Daniel Farke doing, was double sessions, whereas seemingly under Smith and Shakespeare it was minimal training, and seemingly they were more interested in playing rounds of golf of an afternoon than coaching footballers. That's it's quite a well-known fact around the club that they were big on the golf and weren't necessarily there all of the time. So Wagner's come in and brought in a few new coaching staff and has really sort of doubled down quite literally on training. And we are seeing a bit more of a pressing style of football. We are seeing a bit more in terms of fitness and in terms of just watching them. We can see that there's a little bit more identity in how we go about what we do. And again, I think we can judge that more next season, but the early signs are fairly positive.
You mentioned the inconsistency earlier between games, and I mean, from the outside looking in, from a total kind of neutral perspective, it could seem to some like Norwich haven't kicked on as much as you might have hoped under Wagner. And I think that might just come down to the fact that recently relegated team, there's always that kind of expectation, and I think especially with Norwich as well, because you're always up there fighting for the automatics, and it seems. Nearly daft considering 1 point off the playoffs. But why do you think it is that you maybe haven't kicked on, or you still kind of have them inconsistencies?
I mentioned the home form. If you're going to be successful in any season at any level, your home form needs to be, that's your bread and butter. That's where you need to be. That's where you need to be picking up, the majority of your points. What I will say about the inconsistency is we were so poor under Dean Smith, and this is going to sound bizarre, but hear me out. We were so poor under Dean Smith. We were winning games, and we didn't know how we were winning them. Now, I know you can say, a team at the top of the league, sometimes they'll have a couple of games where they won't play well, but they'll win. And you always say it's that cliche, it's a sign of a good team. But we didn't play well for months, and we were in a false position, most of the fans thought. And I kind of feel like we got, there was a run of games where we were picking up points against teams that we shouldn't have been picking up points against anyway under Smith. So I kind of feel like we've eventually just been found out, and we've come up against better teams, and that's where we've Burnley've done a double over us. Sheffield United beat us at home a few weeks ago. Sunderland beat us at home. So we've come up against slightly better teams on occasions and been found out. But I absolutely get the point, and I agree with it, that from the outside in, we haven't necessarily progressed, certainly in terms of a league position under Wagner versus when Dean Smith was sacked. But there was so much more to it than that. There was a lot off the field. The fans were so disconnected. I haven't known a time where fans had felt so disconnected to the club in a long time. And so it kind of had to happen. And the fans are now much more on board. And like I say, I keep mentioning next season because I kind of feel like this season's a step too far to achieve anything. But I totally get the point that from the outside in, it might look like we've sacked a manager who was doing okay, replaced him with a new manager, and there's not been a great impact. Which would be fair from someone that's not watched much of Norwich City or isn't involved in sort of fan sentiment and stuff. But there is much more of a, I'm not saying it's cloud 9, 10 out of 10, but there is much more of a positive feel about the club now than 6 months ago for sure.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, we've had similar at Boro, being disconnected from the team, and it's definitely changed kind of a lot over the last couple of years. Well, probably season and a half, and it's all you need sometimes, isn't it? But you mentioned earlier as well, you got the playoff carrot after the win against Blackburn. You are still currently 1 point off the playoff places. Are you confident in getting there?
No, that's not the answer you're looking for, was it? That's a really boring, pessimistic answer. But I genuinely, and I've said this for the last, I was at the Millwall game when we won there surprisingly 3-2, and everyone was, as you were after a good away win, everyone's we'll get playoffs. And even then, I'm thinking I still don't think we're good enough. And the consistency is what has and probably will cost us, or the inconsistency rather. I think it would almost be, and again, this might sound a bizarre statement, but I almost think it would be good if we didn't get the playoffs, because it would give fans and some of the people involved at the football club a bit of a wake-up call to say, right, actually, there are X amount of first team players that aren't up to standard. There's certain players where squad depth is concerned that aren't up to standard. Let's have an overhaul. Let's think about bringing in a lot of new faces and getting rid of some dead wood, and having a real good go under Wagner with some of his signings next season. So I've already written the playoffs off, which might sound ridiculous given the fact that it's still tight and there's not a huge amount of games left, but there's certainly going to be some twists and turns, isn't there, in the next few weeks. But I kind of think that it wouldn't be, unless it cripples us financially and we end up in a couple of seasons of real sort of trouble. It might not be the worst thing to happen to give us a bit of a kick up the backside sort of thing and reassess where we're at as a football club.
I'd say that's fair enough. I mean, hypothetically though, if you did get there and you kind of in the lottery, fifth and sixth, you'd be playing either Luton or Boro. What would you make of your chances then? Anything can happen in the playoffs, I suppose.
And you've just mentioned it being a lottery, and I know that is kind of a bit of a cliche that gets thrown around, but it really is. Look at the teams who've gone up in recent years and where it's. I wouldn't want to. I'd be more confident of playing Luton. No, that might sound bizarre based on where they are, but I don't know. I think over two legs, what it is, Tom, I just don't like playing Middlesbrough. That's the biggest thing. And especially living here and being from here, it's. I think if we can avoid Middlesbrough at all costs, personally, I'll be a lot more relieved at the prospect of playing Luton over two games than playing Middlesbrough. So close to having to play Middlesbrough on Friday night. So for my stress levels and from my perspective, I'd much rather we play Luton. But regardless of who it is, I don't think we'd have enough about us over two legs to. Yeah, and then it's the final lose, you get the final lose. I'm not sure. I don't even know who's going to finish top two yet, as none of us do. You would expect, well, we know who's going to finish top, but in terms of finishing second, we'd think it would be Sheffield United. But again, do they get caught? Would I fancy us against them if they finish third? Probably not. So I'm not going to sound too down and pessimistic, but I'm trying to be as realistic as possible. And I think Norwich City as a football club needs a hell of a lot more realism at the moment than it does for optimism, because actually we need to reassess where we're at as a club. So if we get to the playoffs, brilliant. It is a lottery, like you say. It's good fun. Everyone loves the playoffs. You never know. We've got history there, obviously, from a few years back, which I won't mention too much because of involved. But we'll gloss over that. But in terms of this season, it might be a step too far, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I was going to say the feeling's mutual about not wanting to play each other in the playoffs because, bad memories of that. But You mentioned the game there on Friday. We'll move on to that now. Looking ahead for it, who should Boro be looking out for from Norwich going into Friday's game? Who's on form at the moment?
Do you know who's really impressed this last 2 or 3 months? Really, I think since Wagner came in is Gabriel Sara. He's a Brazilian midfielder who pretty much does everything. He's not necessarily he's not necessarily a ball-winning midfielder, but I've seen him break the play up. Very good on the ball, good range of passing, decent set-piece taker. He's been in the goals of late as well, which is always good for your midfielders if your midfielders are chipping in with goals, especially given that Pukki's been out of form a little bit. Sargent's our top scorer, but he's struggled for goals. So when your midfielders are chipping in, it takes a bit of the stress off the strikers, I suppose. So Sara for me is the biggest, is certainly the most informed player that we've got. And I can't believe I'm saying this because he scored the winner at the Riverside a few years ago. But Onel Hernandez, which obviously you guys know all about because you had him on loan, and Birmingham City have had him on loan. That kind of sums up where we're at as a football club, to be honest. Onel Hernandez is still one of our biggest threats, however many years later from the previous win at the Riverside. So, but in all fairness and all credit to him, he's been fantastic again since Wagner's come in. So he was brilliant at Blackburn the other day. He was good against Rotherham on Monday. He's quick, he's direct. But obviously know all about him from the few games he had there. So Between Sarah and Hernandez, who will play on the wing, I think those two players could certainly cause some problems. My biggest concern, as I've mentioned, is a lack of goals overall from the likes of Pookie or Sargent or whoever it might be. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, you've just given me a bit of a flashback there because I do remember seeing Norwich on TV and thinking Hernandez was standing out at that point. So yeah, that's not particularly something to look forward to for us, I think, on either wing. But I mean, from the other side of things, are there any Boro players you're not looking forward to coming up against on Friday? Obviously, if we're going on, football gods have written this. Aaron Ramsey played for Norwich earlier in the season. He's been on decent form for Boro, especially the last few games. He has got quite a few goals. Might be one that kind of stands out as would be typical if it happens.
Definitely. I wonder what odds you could get on both players scoring against previous clubs. I mean, it would be ridiculous if House and Ramsey and Hernandez score, but even if Ornell gets a goal and Ramsey gets a goal, even the odds on that would be pretty high.
Housen doesn't score. Not anymore.
He's scored some screamers for us in the past, but he's changed how he is as a player these days, hasn't he? Now he's getting a little bit older. But no, where Ramsey's concerned, we saw glimpses of that player, and he was quickly shipped back to Aston Villa. I don't know the ins and outs of what happened, but he rather suddenly ended up back at Villa as soon as Dean Smith was relieved of his duties, which was a strange coincidence. And I think we even thought there was a statement about him being injured or something, which for him to then sign for Middlesbrough in the January. You got him on loan, obviously, in the January, didn't you? So
yeah,
it was all a little bit strange, a little bit suspect. But he's showing the player that Villa believe he will progress into be. I saw his header the other day at Bristol City. That was some header, some well taken goal. That he's been in. You say he's been in the goals, and he is a good creative player. He's got a lot of I think footballing intelligence. It's one thing having ability, but it's another thing being able to kind of know how to use it and what to do with the sort of the space that you find yourself in and make those runs. So you can see it now that he'll nick the winner on Friday. And if he doesn't, another player is obviously Akpom. I mean, the goals that he scored this season is just ridiculous. I know he's never been prolific. He wasn't even wanted, I don't think.
No, he wasn't. It looked for all certainty he was out on his way out in the summer.
Which is bizarre, isn't it? Sometimes it takes a manager to have a bit of faith in a player. And certain players just click under certain managers. We had it with Grant Holt under Lambert. It just, for whatever reason, it just worked. It just clicked. And he'd not been that prolific anywhere before, and he didn't really do a great deal anywhere after. And that could be it for Middlesbrough, where Akpom and Carrick are concerned, that it just clicks and it works well. So, listen, he's obviously full of confidence. He's scored a hell of a lot of goals. We've got Grant Hanley. Looks like he's done for the season. He got injured at Blackburn. Gibson came off in the same game. So we've got. How old is Amobamidele? Amobamidele is probably 20, 21, something like that. We've got a young lad at centre-back and a makeshift holding midfielder playing centre-back. So if ever there was a chance to score goals against Norwich, it's this weekend, because we're very, very shy on defensive qualities for sure. So I can see Ramsey and Akpom having a field day, to be honest.
Well, I mean, my next question was going to be what are Norwich's strengths and weaknesses, but I feel like you might have just summed up the weakness part of that. On the strength part of it, where do you think Norwich can look to win the game on Friday? It's
a strange one, because I remember hearing the Sky commentator say about Middlesbrough being really good on the break, and I've watched bits of Middlesbrough of late. Obviously, not a great deal, but the pace going forward is certainly a threat. I kind of feel like both teams are going to be good on the break, so it would be brilliant if it was, from an entertainment perspective, it would be brilliant if it was like a game of basketball. It really would. But I kind of see that as being something that happens a fair bit. Obviously, under Carrick, you control possession a lot, which is nice to watch, and it's good football. It's good patient play. And I think if we're going to get anything, it's going to be on the break with the likes of Hernandez and Sargent's pace and the players that do have a little bit of quality, hopefully making a difference. But honestly, Tom, I'd snap your hand off for a draw right now. But I can see Boro, being the better team and having the majority of the ball and dictating the game. And Norwich hopefully some of our strengths, like I say, are in the pace of Hernandez. Marquinhos is kind of hitting a bit of form of late. We've got him on loan from Arsenal. I know he's really highly thought of there, and it's taken him a bit of a while to adapt, but he's coming to his own of late. So Marquinhos on one side, if Hernandez starts on the other, on the break we might look a threat. But give me a draw, twist my arm for a draw, Tom, and I'll take it all day.
I was going to say Marquinhos is a name that does put fear into me a little bit, because he was absolutely mint in my footy manager game for Boro this year. So
the funniest part, there was genuinely a couple of Norwich fans who thought we'd signed the centre back from PSG at first. That was a little bit of an anticlimax, but he's been good. I know he's one of them from FM that I've seen him go through the years. When you get to 2035 and his stats are 16, 17s and 18s, he's one of them that's always a bit of an FM wonder kid, isn't he? And
he is
certainly a lot of promise, and he's coming into his own. Unfortunately, he's not going to be here next season to sort of for us to see the fruition of it. But yeah, him on one side, Hernandez on the other. It could be interesting to see what we do on the break.
I was going to say there as well, it seems like you guys had a fairly similar mix-up to what I had when I found out we'd signed Aaron Ramsey. I was over in Ireland at the time. I just got the notification on my phone, and I was like, "But we signed Aaron Ramsey," of all people.
Yeah, it's one of them where, without any further context, you can get very happy or very sad depending on which way you take it. So yeah, I think he's playing football. Is he playing second division Italy, I think, now, or France? Something
like that, yeah. I think we definitely got the better Aaron Ramsey. Well, you said you twist your arm and it'd be a draw, but prediction for Friday's game, and are you going as well? Obviously, you're in the area.
I am indeed going. Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it, but there's a bunch of us that are going. Yeah. Let's go. Let's go head and let's go heart. I had a daft dream after the Blackburn game that we won 3-1 at Middlesbrough. So my heart's saying 3-1, but my head and every fibre of seriousness and of watching a lot of Norwich City of late is telling me that it's probably, I'd say 2-1 Middlesbrough. I think we might get a goal, but I think Middlesbrough will dominate, and I think defensively, based on the fact that we've got so much. Or rather so little defensive cover and options, and therefore so much injury issue of late. I think we're there to be got at, and I think Middlesbrough, especially the form that you're in. I know you've dipped of late a little bit, but under Carrick you've been a whole different beast. So I think Middlesbrough should probably just edge it, especially at home with hopefully a bumper crowd and a Friday night under lights and all that kind of thing. I think Middlesbrough edge it. I think probably 2-1, which obviously I'd be gutted about, Tom. I really would, because it hurt the last time in November, because I don't think we'd been beaten by Middlesbrough for quite a while. It was probably the Karanka game at Norwich.
Yeah, I think that was the last time at Carroll Road, right?
Yeah, it was at 1-0. So it's been a while, and then obviously November happened where we went 1-0 up and didn't. It was classic Dean Smith. We didn't kill the game off, and you got that worldie and the Crooks winner, wasn't it, later on? I think so. Yeah. I can see it ending 2-1 again. If I was a betting man, that would be the way that I would go.
Well, I very much hope you're right.
I hope I'm not, of course. But yeah.
But that was everything for tonight, Matty. Cheers for joining me, and to the listeners or watchers, thanks for tuning in. As always, this was your opposition preview show, Up the Boro Breakdown.